If you're anything like me, there's been times where you wonder, why am I like this? And not on this philosophical, abstract level, but very practical, like why am I not the person that I want to be? Why do I say things that later I wish I could take back? Why do I do things that I know I shouldn't? Why do I have lustful thoughts or feel insecure and anxious? I've had moments in my life where I reacted in ways that, if a video of it would one day appear on the internet, I'd never leave my house again. Just the shame. And here's what makes all of this so hard. Like, you would think that once you've observed these negative traits in yourself, once you've reflected on these negative experiences that you've been through, that it'd be easy to say, like, okay, I don't like this. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to change, be a better person. But how many times haven't we repeated that exact behavior that we just apologized for the last time? How many times haven't we fallen for the same weakness? Why are we seeming to be so out of control to be the person that we want to be? Why are we like this? This is the 5th episode of the series New to Faith. In the last episode, we saw what went down in the Garden of Eden, how Adam and Eve and planet Earth became involved in this supernatural war between good and evil. And we saw how humanity kind of ended their relationship with God and therefore would naturally end up facing extinction. But that's not the only problem that this Eden couple introduced into our human experience. Once you get what else happened in that Garden of Eden, you'll understand much more about your own life. In this episode, I want to show you that God is benevolent. So we have this tree in the Garden of Eden, and God warned them to not eat of it. Now we've come to understand in the previous episode that even though this tree seems to be out of place in a perfect paradise, it was actually a deeply profound expression of freedom and love by a God who wants to respect our will. Now, even if you're a Bible newbie, you probably know how the story continued, that Adam and Eve, they chose to eat of the tree. But now I want to show you something that on first glance, it doesn't seem to be such a big deal, but it actually will illuminate our understanding about all these psychological human problems that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. So God comes into the garden and asks them a question. And notice Adam's response. Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? Then the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. What did Adam do? Well, clearly he threw his wife under the bus by laying the blame on her, and then even blaming God for giving him this woman in the first place. Now, we can't judge Adam, because we've all done this, especially if you had a younger sibling when growing up, they were an easy scapegoat. But even, how many times haven't we blamed God? Even non-believers blame God for the suffering in the world. We're very familiar with this finger-pointing attitude, but what makes this a big deal is this is not who God made Adam to be. Let's break that down. God tells us many times all throughout his book, the Bible, that he made Adam and Eve in his likeness. Humanity was created to be a reflection of God himself. I once was in New Zealand, and there was this beautiful mirror lake. It perfectly reflected those mountains and the sky and the trees. It was beautiful. We took a photo of it, and if we would turn the photo upside down, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. We were made to be that reflection of God. What an honor to be made in such a way that we reflect the Almighty God. Now, through our education system, our society, and wherever the devil is propagating all kinds of lies about what God would be like, well, this is what God is like. He genuinely wished nothing but the very best for us, because he is a benevolent God. He wants our good. So all the same values that make up who God is are the same values that make up who we are, how we live, which is great news because these values are things like integrity and honesty, loyalty, creativity, joy, peace, all these good and beautiful things. Now we call this in one word righteousness, meaning morally right. And at the heart of all of that is love in its purest form. Love that does not seek its own, but is other-centered. Love that is self-sacrificing. You can think of how we have these laws in nature, like gravity and thermodynamics and buoyancy. They constitute how the world works. In the same way, these values of God are like the behavioral laws in our human nature that constitute a moral, functioning human life. This is how we were meant to work. With these values driving our decision-making, our ambitions, our feelings, this is how we find fulfillment and happiness. This is how we are made to be and how we are meant to live. But Adam's response, was that self-sacrificing? It's the exact opposite. Self-preservation. How did that happen? See, when Adam and Eve ate of the tree, they did it because the devil convinced them to believe that it would benefit them to live by different values. That these behavioral laws that God created were actually limiting their true potential. And if they would just break free from those laws, they could reach a higher life form. They would be like gods themselves. They would have the authority and the power of God. They could decide for themselves what is right and wrong and how to live and what is truth. They could be in control. And Adam and Eve, they chose to break the laws of their human nature. And in its simplest form, this is what the Bible means with the word sin. It's to live outside of the intended design. They chose to change the values by which they now wanted to live. They breached these behavioral laws of loyalty, of integrity, of selflessness. And instead they embraced this self-seeking and self-exalting philosophy. Now, here's the practical problem with that. As you deviate from, say, for example, the values of honesty and peace and generosity, if you deviate from that, then where do you end up? On a path of lying, anxiety, greed? Does that sound like the path that leads to human happiness? No, because we're not made to find inner peace as a result of cheating on your partner rather than being faithful to them. Or to find joy in taking other people's stuff rather than sharing what you have. Or to find fulfillment in living for yourself, living egotistical, instead of serving those around you. We're not designed to live in that way. It's like putting diesel in a petrol car. I mean, you have the freedom to do so, but the natural result will be that you break down and suffer along the way, because the design is not made for that. And so Adam and Eve, they fundamentally corrupted their human nature, that likeness of God, that inner drive for their decision-making, their ambitions, behavior, as they replaced that heart of selflessness for a heart of selfishness. And we immediately see the effects of this change, what it leads to. Adam putting himself first, seeking to save himself at the cost of his own wife. She made me do it. Now skip to 6,000 years later, our present day. What does all of this have to do with us? Well, guess where we all come from? Look at what the Bible records, what happens with the children being born from Adam and Eve. It says, "This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day that they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth." Did Adam pass along the likeness of God in which he was created as was the plan? No, because Adam wasn't like God anymore. Instead, what Adam passed along was that egotistical, corrupted nature. And that is why, like we opened the episode with, all of us struggle. All the problems that we face, toxic thoughts that we have, bad traits that we have, harmful habits that we get stuck in and can't seem to break free from, why it's so hard for us to do what is right and so easy to do what is wrong, all of that emerges from this self-seeking, be your own God mindset that we have inherited from generations before us. Now, here's where the problem gets worse. Listen to what God says about this mindset. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. So this mindset, it both radically changed our dynamic with God. Instead of having this close, intimate relationship with our Creator, we now consider Him an enemy. But also, it made us hostile toward the very values of God, which we were designed to live by, to find our happiness and fulfillment in. And that is because a selfish heart considers selflessness a threat. Because selfishness is, you need to protect yourself, put yourself first, and not sacrifice yourself for others. These two mindsets are completely incompatible with each other. Now, the interesting thing is, some of us may notice a friction in our own lives. Because even though we live the way we do, naturally driven by a selfish, corrupted nature, and we cannot recognize that in our own lives, yet also we may feel this pull to wanting to do what is right. And that is not natural. That's only because God is a benevolent God. He wants our good. So through His Holy Spirit, He is speaking to our conscience, trying to instill in us a longing to want to do what is good. And that's why most people recognize the values of God as we talk about it with each other as good qualities, responsible, compassionate, polite. So we may even feel that we want to become a better version of ourselves. We want to change. So some try to fix themselves by self-help books and willpower. Others have these spiritual practices of yoga and meditation, all then seeking the power to implement these changes. But nothing that we can do can change our human nature. We're weak. We fall back in our old ways. And even the good things that we appear to do, though we don't like to acknowledge it, are tainted by selfishness. The Bible phrases it as us being slaves to the power of sin. That's why we feel so out of control to become the person that we want to be. It's because we are out of control. But our benevolent God didn't stop at just trying to instill in us a longing for good, but He can give us everything we need to live a new life with a restored, uncorrupted human nature and a restored relationship with our Creator. So how do we get that new life?